We always hear about the Age of Discovery as this grand story of brave explorers, right? But what if the whole thing wasn't really about courage at all? What if it was about something way more basic, economics? A ruthless, high stakes race for money that literally redrew the map of the world. And it all kicked off because of a craving for something, well, surprisingly simple.
Okay, so let me ask you something. Put yourself back in the 1400s. The open ocean is terrifying. It's a complete unknown. The ships, they're tiny. Storms can snap them in half. Your odds of coming back are, let's be honest, not great. So why on earth would anyone risk all of that? The answer is way simpler than you'd guess, and honestly, it's the key to everything we're going to talk about.
It was for a taste of pepper. Seriously, pepper. And yes, cinnamon, cloves, silk, all that good stuff. But this wasn't just about making food taste better. No, this was about a kind of economic desperation so deep that it pushed kings and queens and merchants to the absolute edge, to gamble literally everything on finding a new way to get their hands on the riches of the East. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the crazy economics of the spice trade. Then we'll get into the new tech that made all this possible. After that, we'll look at how Portugal and Spain played this game very, very differently. And finally, we have to talk about the devastating human cost that came with it all. Okay, let's dive in. Our whole story really kicks off with a classic supply and demand problem. Basically, Europe's rich and powerful were absolutely hooked on luxury goods from Asia, but getting a hold of that stuff was becoming insanely, ruinously expensive. And look, we're not just talking about nice little extras. Think about it. No refrigerators, right? Spices like pepper and cloves were absolutely crucial for keeping meat from going bad over the winter. But it was more than that. Piling your plate with spices, wearing fancy silk, that was the ultimate power move. It was the 15th century version of pulling up in a supercar. It screamed to the world, "I've made it." So what was the big problem? Well, here it is. Smack dab in the middle, between Europe and all these amazing goods, was the Ottoman Empire. And they were powerful. They controlled all the old-school overland routes, the Silk Road, and basically acted as the world's biggest, most powerful gatekeeper. And this little chart just lays out the crisis perfectly. The Ottomans slapped massive taxes on everything that passed through, so something that was pretty cheap in Asia would land in Europe with an absolutely insane price tag. We're talking about entire kingdoms getting bled dry just to pay this markup. It couldn't last. They knew they had to find a way around the middleman.
But how do you even do that? I mean, sailing out into the open Atlantic was basically a death sentence. Until it wasn't. A few key pieces of new tech completely changed the game. This is where you see human ingenuity kick in when the economic pressure gets high enough. First up, you've got the Caravel. Now, this was not your granddad's clunky cargo ship. It was small, nimble, and most importantly, it was tough. It was built to survive the brutal open ocean. It was basically the perfect ship for the job. And then you've got this, a total game changer, the Leighton sail. Before this, if you had square sails, you pretty much had to go wherever the wind pushed you. You were at its mercy. But these new triangular sails, they let ships zigzag against the wind. All of a sudden, you weren't just a passenger anymore. You were the pilot. You could actually choose where to go. Navigation got a massive upgrade too. Meet the Astrolabe. This cool little gadget let sailors measure the position of the stars to figure out their latitude, basically how far north or south of the equator they were. This was huge. For the very first time, you could be out in the middle of a giant, empty ocean and still have a pretty good idea of where you were. And to top it all off, the magnetic compass gave them a steady, reliable sense of direction no matter what. So let's just put all the pieces together. You have a tougher ship, sails that let you go almost anywhere, and tools that tell you where you are and which way you're headed. Suddenly, that terrifying, unknown ocean, it started to look a lot less scary. It actually seemed manageable. So you've got the motive and you've got the means. The question is, who's going to make the first move? The answer? Portugal. But they didn't just dive in head first. Oh no, they played the long game. Their strategy was slow, it was careful, and it was incredibly patient. And you can see just how patient they were. For almost 100 years, Portugal just inched its way down the coast of Africa. Every single voyage pushed just a little bit farther, mapping the way, learning the currents, and setting up trading posts for gold, ivory, and enslaved people. It was a slow, long-term investment. But boy, did it pay off. In 1498, Vasco da Gama finally makes it all the way to India. Boom! Portugal had found the back door. They cut out the middleman, and the money that started rolling in was just astronomical. So while Portugal is playing this slow and steady game, their biggest rival, Spain, is watching from the sidelines. And they're starting to get really antsy. They see Portugal about to hit the jackpot, and they know they need a shortcut, and they need it now. And to really get what was going on in Spain, you gotta understand the timing. It's 1492, the same year Columbus sails. Spain has just finished the Reconquista, this incredibly long, incredibly expensive war. I mean, centuries long. The result? The royal bank account is basically empty. And the monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, they are not looking to spend money on big, expensive new ventures.
So this situation creates two totally opposite strategies. You've got Portugal with their slow, steady, let's not mess this up plan. And then you have Spain. They're broke, they're desperate, and that makes them willing to listen to a wild idea from some guy named Christopher Columbus, a high-risk, high-reward Hail Mary. Forget going around Africa, let's just sail west and get there faster. And this is the part people miss. Ferdinand and Isabella didn't back Columbus because they were some brilliant visionaries. They backed him because it was a low-cost gamble, a cheap lottery ticket. Honestly, most experts thought his plan was nuts. But the monarchs figured, hey, let's give him 3 small ships and a small crew. If he vanishes into the Atlantic, oh well, we didn't lose much. But what if he's right? The payoff would be unbelievable.
And of course, we all know how that lottery ticket paid out. Columbus was completely, totally wrong. He had his math on the size of the Earth all messed up. He wasn't anywhere near Asia. But in one of the biggest accidents in history, he bumps into an entire hemisphere that Europeans had no idea was there. So yeah, he failed miserably at his actual mission. But in failing, he changed the world forever.
Okay, and this is where the story pivots and gets really dark. Because this solution to Europe's economic woes, all these new trade routes and new lands, it came with a price. An absolutely devastating price, paid by the millions of people who were already living there.
So how did they justify all this? Well, they came up with a pretty convenient legal and religious idea called the doctrine of discovery. The logic was twisted. It basically said that if a land wasn't ruled by Christians, then it was empty. It was free for the taking. It was the ultimate permission slip, giving them what they saw as the moral and legal right to just walk in, claim territory, and take over.
And this doctrine created a horribly effective playbook. Step 1, discover and claim the land. Step 2, use the doctrine as your excuse. Step 3, seize the resources, enslave the people. And step 4, establish permanent control. This pattern got its start with the Portuguese in Africa, but it became the blueprint for European colonization everywhere. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, it's pretty clear. The Age of Discovery wasn't really a storybook adventure. It was a brutal, global free-for-all driven by pure economics. A craving for things like pepper and silk kicked off this incredible chain reaction. It spurred new tech, fueled high-stakes gambles, and even created a philosophical excuse for conquest that led to unbelievable suffering and completely remade the world as we know it.
Which really leaves us with one last big question. There's no doubt that this whole era brought unimaginable wealth to Europe and built massive empires. But that wealth wasn't just created out of thin air. A lot of it was taken. So the real question isn't if there was a price to pay for that simple taste of pepper. The question is, what was the true final cost for the rest of the world?